Founder syndrome is super complicated. And it's super complicated because there is no right answer. Through Techstars and all the investments I've made and the companies I've been involved in starting, and then I've invested in a bunch of other venture funds, so I'm indirectly an investor in lots and lots of companies in the angel investment. I don't know the number, thousands of companies that I've been involved with, either very significantly or very light touch. But in many of these companies I've had exposure to, if I categorize them all around the notion of founders, you end up in a couple of different categories. You end up in the category where one of the founders is the CEO for the duration of the business. You run into a situation where somewhere along the way, a new CEO who is not a founder becomes hired. And then you have other situations where the founder CEO takes a different role in the business, but a new CEO comes in. And interestingly, in a few cases, I've experienced the founders have switched roles. So a founder who wasn't CEO became the CEO. You also have the situation where, on the other axis, it's not just time or dollars invested or the presence of venture capital investors or size of company. It's all kinds of different things cause those shifts. And when a person founds a company, I'm sure there are some people out there in the world that think this way. I know very, very few founders who say, I'm going to start this company and I'm out of here in a year, no matter what. Right? Some founders say, I'm founding this company, but I don't want to be the one running it. Or I'm founding this company and I have a goal of founding and handing off companies. Sometimes that happens. But the vast majority of founders are founding a company because they want to go on a long-term journey, because they have a thing they're obsessed about and a product they want to build or something that they want to accomplish. And when there's one founder, it's often it's a very solitary experience. When there's two founders, it's a team that on day one will never split up, will work together till the end of time. When it's three founders, oftentimes it's even more stronger. We're best friends. We're after this together. And a year or two or three into the business, you often find this dynamic where whatever that initial state was is either not stable or is invalid, or things change. And they can be completely random, have nothing to do with the business. The founder, she gets involved in a relationship with somebody, and the two of them decide they want to move somewhere else. Another founder has elderly parents that get sick, and he decides he needs to go be with his parents. It could be exogenous. It could be in the context of the business. The founders start having conflict. They outgrow each other, or they all have equal roles as individual contributors when there's three of them. But now when there's 40 people in the company and one of the founders is the CEO, the other two founders have important individual contributor roles, but they're not executives anymore. There's new executives in the company. You can also have a situation where founders just disagree on the direction of the business. So, one founder thinks we're going this way and another founder thinks we're going this way. All of these phenomena are messy, but they're normal parts of the evolution of a company. If you look at any origin story of a company, and they're really fun to read, by the way. There's a lot of good, the technology business has been around long enough. There's a lot of good origin stories of, reading the origin story, not just of Google and Facebook, but of AOL. I'm reading the origin story of id Software, the guys that created Doom and Quake. And it's just absolutely fascinating how messy this thing is. There's a great origin story, a book that came out recently, the story of Akamai. Really, really powerful, really fascinating story. And they're not just tech companies, right? I mean, any kind of these origin stories, and you look and you realize that the founder dynamics and what mattered to the founder at the inception of the business, especially businesses that have a long arc and the founders are relatively young, they're in their 20s or 30s, and the business has a 20 or 30-year arc. What happens over that period of time just changes so much. Oh, another one that I just read was the Amazon, the everything story. And the origin story of Amazon is absolutely fascinating, between the people that were there at the very beginning and what worked and what didn't between them, and how that evolved. So this notion of founder syndrome or founders engagement, or the dynamics of founders and other people coming in and how those businesses grow, I think the powerful thing for any entrepreneur is to be introspective about him or herself and what's important to him or her. to recognize that there is no path. It's not a defined, this is what's going to happen. And that as a founder, part of the magic of being a founder is you have an enormous amount of influence, not necessarily control, but influence over how that plays out. And expressing your own views, being introspective, being thoughtful, finding peers who you can interact with and talk to, not taking hearsay as fact. You know, the origin story of Apple is exactly that this happened and that happened. Well, probably not. Like, that was the written history of it, and Apple happens to have a lot of written history, and Intel has plenty of written history, but they all have so many nuances that don't get captured. People don't remember. Human beings either want to be, the writers of these stories either want to be optimistic or they want to be negative, right? There's a goal in terms of writing, history can be boring. Let's make it exciting. Let's spice it up. Not necessarily by being lying or being deceitful, but leaving some things out or putting the juxtaposition of other things together in a sequence that might not have been exactly what happened, but makes for a better story. I think entrepreneurs get wrapped up in there's too much sort of truth about the existing history versus viewing it just as a guide, as a way to relate to and think about what your own origin story is, and then